So in order to create the grid that we need to create for this isometric perspective on the 12 by 12 sheet of paper that you have, you are going to put a border on the paper a 1/2 inch all the way around. So with my 0 on the edge of the paper, I'm going to put a mark on the 1/2 inch right here and 11.5 down here. The paper is 12 inches long, so putting the paper on a 1/2 inch and 11.5 inch, that sets me up for a border on both sides. Raise my ruler up to the top somewhere, put a mark at the 1/2 inch, and then another mark at the 11.5, and now I have 2 lines for which I can connect to create borders on the left and right side of my paper. When you're holding your ruler down, be sure and put one finger close to the top and your thumb close to the bottom. Keep your pencil upright. Drag a line. That way your pencil doesn't slide up under your ruler if you hold it up straight. Now I'm going to turn my paper around 90 degrees. Put my ruler on the edge of the paper, put a mark on the 1/2 inch and the 11.5 just as before. So this time sliding it down to the bottom, putting a mark on the 1/2 inch, making sure my 0 is on the edge of the paper. Put a mark on the 1/2 inch and the 11.5. And then I've got 2 dots on either side to connect. Again, I put my finger and thumb as far apart on the ruler as I can and hold down firmly. And using my pencil straight up and down on that ruler, drag a line through those 2 dots from top to bottom. Do the same thing over here. Line my ruler up on the 2 dots, on the 2 marks. Spread my fingers out as far as I can to hold the ruler down firmly. Drag my pencil straight up and down across the paper. And now I have a 1/2 inch border all the way around my paper. That gives me 11 inches in the middle all the way around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark every 1/2 inch. Basically what I'm doing is I'm making my own gridded paper, my own graph paper in a way. And this is going to be so helpful when it comes time for making my enchanted environment. Be sure that you draw lightly because you have to erase a lot of stuff here. So I'm going to put a mark every 1/2 inch along that line at the top. I'm going to bring my ruler all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to do it again. Put my 0 on the line, on the border line, and then I'm going to put a mark at every 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, and so on. The corner also counts, by the way. I'm going to turn my ruler sideways. You know what? I'm going to turn my paper sideways. That way I can see over my ruler, which gives me a more exact line. And I'm going to put a mark on the 1/2 inch again, all the way down. 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, and so on. I want to make sure that my marks are on the increments of the ruler. A little to the left or a little to the right could make things look a little wonky. Move it to the bottom, do it down here. Same thing. 1/2 inch, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, and so on. All right, once I have done that, I'm going to connect the top corner. Remember, the corners count as an increment. All 4 corners count. I'm going to put my ruler on the very first mark, the corner, and the 8th mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I'm going to connect those 2 dots, the first corner and the 8th mark. Again, draw lightly so you can erase. I just drew that way too dark probably. Draw lightly so you can erase. Now I'm just going to connect corresponding marks. For the corners, it doesn't exactly line up the way it should, and so the best thing I think to do is to continue using the marks on the sides, in this case on the left, to start your line out, but always just kind of like eyeball it and make sure that it is parallel. In this video, I didn't do that. I didn't eyeball it to make sure it was parallel. I tried to use the dot and then like every other mark on the bottom or something like that. It just didn't work out. You'll see here in a minute it doesn't look quite parallel. So I think the best thing here is just to eyeball it and make sure it's parallel. So the same thing up here at the top. I'm just going to use the dots on the right, use the marks on the right side that are 1/2 inch apart, and hold the ruler parallel with the other lines that I've already made to the best of my ability. Really should check them and double check them to make sure that they're parallel. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, for the vertical lines, I'm going to start in the middle because the corners are sort of wonky. But I think if I start in the middle, it'll look a little bit better maybe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and this is the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that's the middle. All right, so this is not totally accurate everywhere, but it's pretty close. I'm just going to make one of these lines like every other one, so as not to clutter my page up too much. Let's go this way. So I'm going to use these lines to help me place my environment. This is what it looks like up close. And now I'm going to make some magic happen. So I guess you could say this is part 2 of this assignment. This is where the real magic happens. The first thing I do is I kind of envision this as being a tile floor of sorts in front of me, like maybe my front lawn covered in a grid, and I envision a hole or a square, and I trace that square, and then I erase everything inside that square. And then this one, I did a rectangle, and I'm erasing everything inside the rectangle. Notice how my pencil lines are just a little bit darker than the original lines that I drew the grid with. I'm just drawing it a little bit darker so I can see what it is that I want to keep and kind of see how it looks with my tiles, with my grid, on my lawn, or however you want to think about it. And then I come back with the eraser and I erase all of the grid that is in the middle of it. It starts to look like, in this particular part, just white spaces in the middle of this grid. But once I start adding the verticals and you start to see the inside walls of these holes, it'll start to make more sense. As you're going, you can change things up. You can correct. As long as you draw lightly, as long as you don't grind your pencil into the paper, you can always erase. And then when you do the shading and all of that later on, it's going to cover up any pencil that you couldn't erase. So my idea here was I started with a square in the middle, and then I made these little pieces kind of like petals of a flower off to the side. So notice these verticals that I am drawing on each of the corners. It doesn't take much to look at it and kind of figure out where you need a back inside corner. And once you figure that out, it gets really easy. Just kind of examine it a little bit, think about it a little bit, and just make sure that your verticals are parallel with any of the guidelines and the side of the paper. That's sort of the first rule of this, is to make sure that your vertical lines are parallel with the sides of the paper and your diagonal lines are parallel with all of the other diagonal lines. Once I had the first center pieces done, I started to add more holes to my environment. The rules say that you have to have, the rules for the assignment for this project are that you have to have somewhere between 7 and 10 holes. When I counted, I had 14, and then I did a bunch more holes. So you can just keep adding and adding and adding. There's no limit to this. Just do what your imagination guides you to do. But again, most importantly, make sure that your vertical lines are parallel with the side of the paper and that your diagonal lines are parallel with all of the other diagonal lines. So after doing the first couple of holes, I had this idea for making enough holes close enough together that I could make doors and windows down inside of the holes, and you'll see me do this later on in the video. little doors and windows so you can see kind of how each room is connected to the other. I also wanted to create like a little walkway in between each room on the top. So I'm leaving sort of a whole square between every room. You don't have to do this. You can sort of set up your own rules for it. Just make sure that the verticals are parallel with the verticals and the diagonals are all parallel with the diagonals. You can use the ruler anytime you need to make sure that your lines are straight, but once you have all of the holes established, try not to be too caught up with the ruler. Let your imagination flow. Some lines can be hand-drawn and have kind of a wobbly feel to them. There is good kind of variety of line. At this point right here, I'm just thinking this is pretty neat looking. I am looking across the top of like this maze, across this labyrinth, and it is really cool looking to me. But I'm going to continue to add and be fanciful with it and just see how far I can take my drawing. Remember, there's some lines that you're really not going to see, some vertical lines. You're not going to see the corners that are on the inside facing away from you. You're only going to see the corners that are facing you. And some of the lines are going to overlap. And that's going to cause a little bit of confusion. So I'm just kind of finishing up the corners. Also notice some of my rooms go off the page, go off the sides, behind the border, if you will. And now I'm going to start adding things like doors. I wanted to have sort of an old-timey dungeon-like feeling to this. So I've got archways leading from one room to another. But they don't all have to be archways. I'm doing windows. There's a lot of things that are going to happen here, and I don't really need to explain all of them because you don't need to do them exactly like I'm doing it. You need to come up with your own ideas and your own imagination, your own creativity. I also, somewhere along the way, had the idea that adding people, and I know it's kind of hard to draw people, but drawing people will help give it a sense of scale. But I'm also going to play with the sense of scale in a little while too by drawing people who are small that would easily fit through all of these doors that I'm drawing. And then I'm also going to draw people that are huge that really just kind of barely fit in the room at all. You'll see this in a minute. There's really too much to be done here for one video. So I may finish this up in a second video. But if you want to see the final picture for sure, check out my Instagram. Check it, and periodically. I don't know how long this picture is going to take me. You have at least 5 days to work on this, and I'm going to be working on mine while you're working on yours. And so in about 5, 6, 7 days, you'll be able to look at my Instagram and see it in its completion. Right here, I decided not to do the arch, but to do some bricks. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep these bricks or not. See what happens with the rest of the picture. So here I decided that I wanted to add to the top of all of the walls and create some walkways in between each of the rooms. And so it's sort of, my idea is that there's like all of these rooms, but on the top of all of the walls there is sort of like a railing around the rooms that you can walk in between. And I don't know how far I'm going to carry that. I'm just kind of messing around, experimenting to see what happens. And then once I got a little bit of that done, I decided to show you what I was talking about in terms of scale. And so I started to draw like little people. So here's like a guy standing on the top of the wall walking, and so it kind of gives you an idea of how tall the walls are, how big the space is. And then there's a little guy sitting on the edge right there, a little shadow back there, and that helps. But I also want to kind of confuse the viewer a little bit, and so I'm going to put a really large person sitting in a room right here who's really too big to fit in there right. That's just kind of it roughed out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to see how yours turn out. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Give it a thumbs up. Check out Tiffany Fox's resources at Teachers Pay Teachers. And yeah, let me know how you enjoy this project in the comments down below. Thumbs up, like, share, comment, subscribe, tap the little bell, and go make an enchanted environment.